I just got home and I checked my YouTube channel and I have over 100 likes now. Some of the people that I follow have like hundreds of thousands of people, but to me, that's extremely exciting. And the reason for this is because YouTube has it set up so that you cannot have a custom URL unless you have over 100 subscribers. So my URL previously was youtube.com/ and then a bunch of letters and numbers that were completely random. So I didn't want to put that on my business card. I didn't want to, it was hard to promote my channel telling people they'd have to search for the channel, that I couldn't just give them a URL or write something down for them. So it's awesome now that I have a custom URL. So it is now Studio Hana, youtube.com/Studio Hana. And I'm quite serious when I say this. Thank you to every single person who has subscribed to my channel, not only because it helped me get a custom URL, to the fact that you guys want to hear what I have to say makes me feel really, really happy and encourages me to want to keep making more content like this. So thank you so much. So in celebration of this, I am going to be showing you my 100 favorite art supplies. No, that's way too much work. I'm just gonna show you 10. The first one is actually a combo of items, which I hope is okay, but I use a cutting pad and a, just a regular box cutter to cut my papers all the time. A lot of the times the notepads that I get are a little bit too big for the type of artwork that I actually want to make, so I basically always have this cutting mat on my table. It's always here. The brand doesn't really matter to me. I've never found like a particular brand that you have to have, but just a self-healing cutting mat, a box cutter, really handy to have around. The next item is a ruler with an inking edge on it. And I'll show you a close-up of that one in a second, but you can see I have 3 different sizes. This one I actually keep in a case over here, which I'll talk about that in a second. But these I use in conjunction with the cutting mat and stuff to cut papers, but I also use them a lot for drawing, for making sure the perspective lines are right or that lines are straight. Basically, an inking edge on a ruler means that there is, let's see if I can show you on this, there is an edge to it that has something underneath, in this case cork, that is a little bit separated from the edge of the ruler itself, so that the metal part of this particular ruler actually rises up above the cork a little bit. And the reason for that is because if you're drawing a straight line using something that is an ink medium, like a pen or something, if this was flush with the paper and touching the paper, then your ink could very easily kind of gloop up and flow underneath your ruler, and that could mess up your nice straight lines. So all this really does is it makes sure that your ink is touching the paper and not the ruler itself, and that's super helpful for drawing with ink. My third item is a high polymer eraser. I tend to use the Pentel ones just because that's what my my store has, and I think that there are other brands that I've probably tried before, but this is the packaging that I tend to recognize the most, so I always go for these. This is an unopened one, but like these are 2 that are currently being used. They just erase really cleanly. They don't leave nasty, those streaky marks that you get sometimes when you're erasing with pencil, and the eraser more just drags the pigment across the paper even more rather than picking it up and erasing it. I feel like these do the best job of not messing up. So I highly recommend these types of erasers. The fourth item that I love to use is this case. You can see the logo right there, but I don't remember what the name of the brand is actually called. My sister got it for me for a gift, I believe off of Amazon, but it's a relatively small case. It's a little bit bigger than my hand, but it has these pockets in the front, and it has plenty of space inside for a lot of pencils, pens, little pockets here for keeping pen refills or even my erasers. It's usually where I stick this guy. It's not a huge case, so if you need to have tons and tons of art supplies with you when you're traveling around, you'll probably want to get one bigger than this. But I honestly don't need more than what can fit in this case, and it kind of keeps me, from packing way too much. I really only need a handful of things, and they will fit into this. A handful of things, and it's the size of my hand. I'm so funny. But yeah, that's what that looks like. And of course it zips shut if I had the use of both my hands right now. So the first pens that I want to mention are the Kuretake brush pens, and they are similar to another type of pen that I use, the Zebra brush pens. They're both brands are made in Japan. But this one I sort of got turned on to recently, and even though they're very, very similar to the Zebra brush pens, they feel a little bit more springy to me. I feel like the nibs, and I mean that could also just be because these are fairly new, but I feel like, especially with these softer ones, you know, I don't know, they feel different. It's so hard to explain. I'm sort of drawing some lines and things for you guys here so you can see a little bit of how they work, how they go from super thin to a lot thicker. They're also just really juicy pens. They're very pleasant to use, and I'm kind of looking forward to using these some more in the future. But yeah, Kuretake brush pens are fun. Now the thing about Kuretake brush pens and Zebra brush pens also is that they are disposable, so you purchase them and then you have to throw them away. That's why I also really appreciate this next category. These are the Pentel Pocket Brush pens. I have two of them here. These are exactly the same, but I like these because you can get refills for them. So I've had both of these cases for a little while now, and whenever they run out, I just put a new refill into them, which I feel like, you know, it's still wasting a little bit of plastic, but it's not wasting as much as having to throw an entire pen away. These pens are really fun to use. Unlike the other pens that I just showed you, the Kuretakes, those have felt tips, which means that the pointy part here, this you know, the brush, the brush part of it, is just made out of a solid piece of felt, and so it moves, it squishes depending on the pressure that you're putting on it. This type of brush, though, the Pentel Pocket Brush, this is made out of separate bristles, kind of like a real brush rather than just a piece of felt. They also can make very thin to very thick lines. Like, look at that, that's a huge difference. They are a little bit difficult to figure out how to use, though. At least they were for me. They are just a little bit wild. Like, if you're drawing towards your hand, you can get pretty smooth lines. If you change directions, then sometimes you end up with kinks and things, and that can be a little bit frustrating if you're not used to using a brush pen, or if you like to have a whole lot of control over your lines. This is the pen, though, that sort of broke me from having to have all my lines, you know, perfect, which I think was actually making a lot of my older artwork look very stiff and not very lively. So I appreciate these for that, and I actually use these a lot too. I just don't like to use them as much for super fine detail work, because when I do get little kinks in, you know, eyes or eyelashes or little detail pieces, then it bothers me a little bit. But I'll use these for overall drawing or outlines or bigger lines that don't need to be as precise. But I really like these a lot too. And then the final pens are actually dip pens. And I'm going to have to put the camera down for a second because I can't open this with one hand. Okay, so these are just regular quill pens, and in the tips I have a nib that's called a Crow Quill nib, and it's super, super teeny tiny. I actually got these when I was in college because I had to for some class. I don't even remember what class it was anymore, but we had to get these Crow Quill pens. It might have been drawing 2 or something. We were experimenting with different types of materials and stuff, but I'd never really liked drawing with nib pens because I kept doing them incorrectly. Kind of like with the brush pen. If you're drawing towards your hand, then the pen is going, or if you rotate the pen to sort of go with the movement that you're doing, it helps the line quality to stay really nice. If you push against the pen, you're just going to make holes in your paper or damage the nib and flick ink everywhere, and it can be a giant crazy mess. So I did have to learn a little bit more about how these actually worked. But these, and I'm probably going to have to zoom in some more in order to show you this. Because these nibs are so small and so fine, you can get really, really tiny lines out of this. I don't use the nib pen with brush pens very often, like in the same piece. Usually I'm either inking with a brush pen or with a nib pen. But the nib pen is fun to work with because you can get different, widths out of it, just like with the brush pen. But I have a small collection of different ink colors, and sometimes I love adding details in a different color than just black. Or I like to do the lines in different colors, and I've done that on a few pieces in the past, and I love the way that it looks. I actually got this idea, I had been using a Crow Quill for a little while, but I had only been using it with Black India ink, but I got the idea of using, red inks or just other color inks from Frannard. And if you've ever heard of her, then you know that her YouTube channel is super adorable and inspiring, and it makes me super happy. And if I'm having a bad day, I can watch her videos and they instantly make me feel better. So, but she also uses colored inks in a lot of her artwork, and I just love that idea. Plus, once you do get the hang of using quill pens like this, they can actually be very easy to control. See all the fine detail that I'm getting here, even in comparison to the smallest lines that I was able to make with the brush pens. Numbers 8 and 9 I'm also going to show you together because they're both paper. Typically I will draw with Bristol paper. Again, I don't really care about the brand a whole lot, but Bristol paper is a fairly smooth paper. You can get it with a different tooth that's a little bit more rough, but I tend to like the smoother side when I use Bristol. I will use brush pens with Bristol paper a lot when I'm trying to get really clean lines, because the paper is smooth enough that you won't get the ink bleeding out into the paper. So this is usually what I end up using the most, is Bristol. But sometimes if I'm going to be coloring something with watercolor or gouache paint, or even using ink washes, then I like to use watercolor paper. And while Bristol is very smooth, watercolor paper usually has more of a texture to it. It's a little bit more toothy, and that will make the artwork look a lot more natural, I guess. But it'll look a little bit more organic, I guess is what I would call it. So you can sort of see the differences here if I can get this to focus correctly, but the Bristol is a lot smoother and the watercolor has this sort of texture to it. So I use both and I love both, but it kind of depends on the style of artwork that I'm doing and how I'm going to color it. Now the last art supply I'm going to mention is light, because if you don't have good lighting, it's going to be really hard to draw. Not only will you not be able to see what you're drawing on your paper, but if you are trying to draw objects that are right in front of you, having bad lighting on those objects is going to make them not look very good, and it's going to be harder to draw something that's really nice. I love using natural sunlight the best if I can get it. Today is actually a pretty nice day, and I don't know if it's going to show up the same on the video. It looks a lot darker, I feel, in the video than it does in real life, so I'm going to have to see if I can color correct it to actually look a little bit more like it does to me in real life. But if I wanted to sit here and draw at this desk, which I will probably do after I am finished filming this video, I totally could. Like, it's actually bright enough that I can see what I'm doing. Natural light is very pleasing to the eye, and it's not as grating as some indoor light bulbs can be. But of course, But of course, if you have access to any kinds of light that can illuminate your space, that is excellent. Thank you guys for watching this video. I hope that you found some new art supplies maybe that you had never tried before. Those pens though, I love them so much. Ink is something that I never really did until a couple of years ago, and so I'm so excited whenever I discover a new type of pen that I can play with. Brush pens are not something that I used to use, but I pretty exclusively use brush pens now for my inking. I love them so much, you guys. What are your favorite art supplies though? Like, I'm kind of really interested to know, are there any good pens out there that I didn't talk about that you could recommend to me? What kind of artwork do you do, and do you have any particular brands or products that work really well for that specific style of artwork that you do? Like, I'm genuinely curious. I love talking art supplies with other artists, so I would love to know what you have to say down in the comments below. Thank you so much for being here. If you are not one of the 100 plus subscribers that helped me reach my goal, then would you consider please subscribing to my channel? I would super appreciate it. Give this video a like if you like art supplies. Give it a thumbs down if you're boring and don't like art supplies. But, like, there's nobody in the world that exists like that, right? Right? Anyway, thank you again for watching, and have a fantastic day.